Welcome to Writers on the Best Advice They Ever Got. We are joined up here by Sangu Mandanna, Wesley Chu, Gini Koch, and Sarah Kuhn. And I am your host today, Jordan Pace. I'm a publicist with Del Rey, so I'm very excited to be here. Very excited to hear all this advice from these amazing veteran authors on their writing process, and we're just very excited to have all of you here. So, without further ado, I'm going to start off with an easy question for all of you. Let me pull up my questions. All right. An easy one to start. What is the best thing to eat or drink with your latest book? Sangu, I'm going to start with you.
That is the easy one? I object to your
warming you up.
Easy. So my newest book, which is out next month, is about witches and potion making and tea and magic. So I would say a really nice cup of tea, which I know is not quite as normal for Americans as it is for us in the UK. But just bear with it. Have the tea.
Okay. All right, and hey, can you guys hear me? That should be the first thing, guys. That's the best advice you can give when you're on the panel. I'm sure everyone can hear you. Second best advice is I'm going to introduce myself real quick. My name is Wesley Chu. I'm a science fiction fantasy author of, I believe it's 12 books now. So my newest book coming out, my newest book coming out August 9th with Del Rey is called The Art of Prophecy. And another great piece of advice is we're giving out 300 copies this weekend at the con. So if you get a chance, look at the autograph sessions and find out where they are and when they are and stuff on
Booth 1515.
Boom! And then to the question. So, what should we be drinking with
or eating?
My new book? Art of Prophecy is an Asian epic fantasy. It's kind of like my love letter to Kung Fu and wuxia movies. So, I would say Thai bubble tea with tapioca with lots of sugar. Lots of sugar.
Ginny?
Sangu, look, do your intro.
Yeah.
No, she's got one right there.
Go ahead, sorry.
Do your intro, and then we'll go back to you.
Well, hi. Sorry for forgetting my intro. I'm Sangu Mandanna. I'm the author of will be seven books next month. I write sci-fi and fantasy, mostly for kids, and my first book for adults is out next. It is the one that's coming next month. It's called The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches, and like I said, it's about witchcraft and potion making and finding a family in a place you might least expect it. Yeah. Woo.
Well, with that fanfare, I'm Gini Koch. I write the Alien Cat and Kitty Cat series for dog books. I also write under a variety of other pen names. I write in all lengths and genres, and as of today, counting anthologies and collections and novels, I have 70 titles. And yes, for those asking, Aliens Like Us, I swear to you, is coming soon. And as for what to drink, well, I think anybody who's ever read any of the Alien series obviously knows, I don't care what it is, you should be drinking a martini.
I'm Sarah Kuhn. I write books and comic books that fall into sort of two categories, Asian American superheroines and nerds in love, and sometimes they're in the same book. That's really the best. I am probably best known for a series called Heroine Complex, which does have both of those things actually in it. And the sixth and final book is coming out very late August, or August, September sort of. It's called Holiday Heroine. And it was sort of my excuse to write my Hallmark holiday movie version of the heroine universe. So obviously, I put every single sweet sugar, gingerbread, candy canes, cookies, like I put all of that in there. It was kind of just like writing the whole book was honestly just an excuse to do that. So you should eat all of that while you're reading.
Yum. Okay. All right. Now that we've buttered you up, let's get to the core question here of the panel. What is the best piece of advice you have ever received about writing, staying writing, writer's block, all of it? Sarah, we're going to start with you and bring it back.
Okay. Sorry, let me adjust my mask. So I think for me, actually the best sort of advice I've gotten, which I think I got from a few people over time, like over, having a writing career and everything, was to learn how to take advice in a way that was nuanced. So I learned how, when I first started writing, I think I was very obsessed with like, what are the rules? If I follow all of these, I will, automatically be a brilliant novelist, and that's not really how it works. And so anything that literally anyone said that was like, this is amazing writing advice, whether it was about the business side or the artistic side, I would really take to heart. I would really internalize. And what I kind of eventually realized after publishing a number of books and making friends with a lot of awesome writers was that most advice is not, I would say actually all advice is not one size fits all. And particularly if you are coming to the business, into any creative business, as I did, with intersecting marginalizations, then a lot of times it really doesn't apply to you because you kind of have to figure out what are the biases of the industry, how am I perceived entering into it, especially since I have pretty much always written characters that were of my marginalized identities. I mean, when Heroine Complex was my debut novel, I was very explicit about saying these are Asian American superheroines. That was kind of my whole thing. And so I very quickly realized that some of the advice that I think people give is like, this is an absolute or this is definite or whatever, I sort of realized did not always make sense for me. And I actually think sometimes that can be a bit harmful because if you are coming into the business, especially with a lot of intersecting marginalizations, writing own voices characters, sometimes when you take that in like that, you can start to think like, am I just not good enough? Like, am I not doing something right? Am I doing, I always think I'm doing something wrong. So I really had to learn how to parse any advice that came my way, to sort of learn the trusted sources that I would take advice from, and to put it through my own filter. And that was something that, I developed over the years with the help of a lot of great established writers who helped give me that advice.
That was awesome.
Mine is somewhat similar. I basically a self-taught writer. I didn't think I was an author for a long time because, as it turns out, I'm an extreme linear writer, but I've been told by a teacher that I knew at that time was an idiot, but it didn't matter because the teacher said the only way to write is to outline, and that works great for business proposals and term papers, but there's a variety of ways to write, and it turned out I was linear, not an outliner. And so the first writers' conference I ever went to, a gentleman named Bob Bose-Bell was the first person I talked to. It was great. I was very nervous. And everybody remembers me from that con because the first thing everyone said to me was, are you okay? Do you need to sit down? Are you going to faint? Yeah, I was a little scared. But one of the things he said to me after sit down and don't faint was that 50% of what anybody tells you from stage about this business or in a book is wrong. He said, 50%, just lop it in half. He said, so when you're sitting there and they say something and you go, that doesn't sound right, he goes, you just remind yourself, Bob says they're wrong. And I did. So anytime somebody said I couldn't write, Bob says you're wrong. Anytime anybody was dismissive, well, Bob says you're wrong. Anytime somebody said this is the only way to do something, Bob said they were wrong. And I held on to Bob says I still have Bob says you're wrong in my mind because it is an individual journey. You cannot make art rigid. Art is not a rigid thing, and any kind of art is not really rigid. There's always something flowing around. We have different schools of art because artists went, I don't want to do it that way, I want to do it this way. And authors get to do that too, just like musicians do, and dancers and everybody else. So yeah, so at this point I can say if somebody tells you something from stage or in a book and you think it's really weird, you can just say, Jenny says you're wrong.
I love, and the only second question of this panel, we're already being like, don't listen to any of us.
Yeah,
Like,
don't listen to us.
The advice you should
but-
take, don't
Only
listen to
listen to half of us,
anything,
basically.
Yeah.
anything we're
Listen-
saying up here.
Half of what we say, right? Yeah. So, and we've already got people skedaddling. Yeah.
The next question is worst piece of advice, so hold on to
Okay.
hold on to yours.
So hold on now, yeah.
All right, so I guess by virtue of attending this panel, just real quick show of hands, how many people here are writers? And how many here are, well, let's do that.
Yay.
And how many here are self-published or are in process of querying and trying to go pro? It's a good amount of us. Fantastic. All right. So, how do I do this? So I was asked to give closing remarks at a writing conference later this year called Surrey International Writing Conference. Fantastic writing conference. And one of the things they told me, like when they gave me the guidelines for the speech, is like, you know what? Say whatever you want, do whatever you want, but at the end of the day, can you try to keep it positive and uplifting? Which, in many ways, is difficult because, I mean, I'm going to give you some real talk about how this industry is like. And as great and inspirational as it is to write, to kind of tell your stories, to kind of get stuff on paper, going pro, as in like making it a career or a job, it is a hard business. And if I debuted in 2013, and my debut class has about a 98% attrition rate, meaning the authors who debuted with me, alongside me that year, are probably no longer in the business. So, welcome to Comic-Con. But so the advice that I got was actually from Elizabeth Bear, and the one thing she said to me early on was, don't quit your day job. To make that transition from doing whatever you're doing to earn a living, support your family, to becoming a full-time writer or a career writer, is that you don't quit your day job until while you're doing both things, you're too busy that something has to give. You're about to drop some balls, so something has to give in terms of your writing work and your day job career work. And when you're at that point is when you go, okay, do I have enough steam right now with this writing career to keep going? So that's probably, I went pretty.
We love
Yeah,
some
that's
literal
good. Yeah,
advice.
dude, that's good.
That is good advice.
That's really good advice.
Sangu?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, just to kind of follow on from what Wes said, there is, I think, a tendency in this industry for relentless positivity. It's just, everything's good, everything's amazing, only share the good news. And I think that can be incredibly hard for an aspiring author, or an author who's not doing as well as everybody else, which, by the way, is all of us, because you will never be doing as well as everybody else on Instagram, on Twitter, because people are sharing the good news. And so I think that one of the best pieces of advice I've ever heard from anybody.
The other
this would
advice
be
is
some
turn
good
your
advice.
phone off.
Phone off.
This is just your personal idiom, isn't it?
I am such a loser. Oh my goodness. All right,
That's Wes's day job.
I gotta go, guys. I gotta go fix some servers.
So turn your phone off when you go on a panel.
Wes.
Wes. And also, I know this is a lot easier said than done, but don't let it get to you. Don't let that relentless positivity make you feel like you were somehow failing in a million different ways, because I promise you, you're not.
Yeah.
But I mean, the best piece of advice anyone has ever given me, and this is quite sentimental and not very industry or professional, but when I was about 13 years old, I was struggling with the fact that I was growing up in a country without a whole lot of access to publishing. I knew I wanted to be an author. I was very young. I really wanted to be an author. I didn't know how that was going to happen. Everything cool and fun seemed to be happening either in England or or here. And my grandfather sat me down and he said, just so you know, there is no such thing as a new story. There are no new stories, but there are new voices. And no one will ever be able to tell a story the way you tell that story. So no matter what you think, no matter where you are in the world, no matter what you think the obstacles in your way might be, just remember that your voice counts and no one else will be able to tell that story. And I mean, I think that that is probably the reason I kept going, because that's what I come back to when I'm struggling. That's what I come back to when I've had a rejection, which still happens, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
And like, you could be published 6 times and still get rejected. But it's what I keep coming back to, the fact that my voice matters, and so does all of your voices. Yeah.
That was so beautiful. Wow. All right. Well, on that note, what's the worst piece of advice you've ever gotten about writing, trying to break into the industry, whatever it may be? Worst piece of advice, starting with you, Sangu.
Oh, so many, so much. Off the top of my head, I'll pick 2 and limit myself. One is that you need a degree or qualifications to write books. You don't. I have one, and I can. I mean, I don't regret getting my degree because I really enjoyed going to university, and I met my husband there. So it would be silly to be like, oh, I wish I hadn't gone. But in terms of my writing career, I don't think it made even a teeny bit of difference. I was writing for years before I went to university. I am writing now. You don't need a degree. You don't need a course. You don't need to pay loads and loads of money to somebody who tells you that this is what's working and this isn't. You just need to do it. Practice, really. And practice is free. So yeah, just don't waste your money is probably, so the worst advice is, that you need one of those things. And probably the other thing is, I think much like both Sarah and Ginny said, which is that there is only one way to do certain things, that don't use adverbs, don't use too many adjectives. I use both a lot. I'm still somehow published.
Yeah.
And there isn't a right way to do anything when it comes to creativity, I think. And I wouldn't, don't let anyone tell you that there is, really.
Practice is free. That's going to be the slogan. Wes?
When somebody tells you that they have a great book idea and they want you to write it, and you guys split the profits, don't take them up on that deal. But when it comes to writing, I mean, definitely what Sangu said was absolutely on the dot. I don't have a degree in this field, and when I was like 15 years old, I was like, my dad's an English professor, and I was like, Dad, I'm gonna be an English major just like you, I'm gonna write books for a living or whatever. And my father was like, no, son, your life will suffer. And then he made me go into computer science. So, and if you know any engineers who don't really focus on writing, your grammar deteriorates really badly. But so by the time I switched over, I tried to become a writer. I had terrible grammar because I never had to write full sentences for the past 15 years. And there's one thing I've learned about it is, grammar can be fixed. Okay. Grit and effort is all based off of your personal situation, okay? The only thing that really, really matters at the end of the day is storytelling. And storytelling comes from reading, storytelling comes from writing, storytelling comes from just absorbing medium and learning to craft stories and worlds in your head. So I'm on a lot of like, writing forums, self-publishing groups and everything. And definitely the whole thing about toxic positivity is so true. So when you do, sometimes you can't even be like appropriately critical or appropriately, have anything remotely negative, because it kind of goes against the narrative of like, rah, rah, we're gonna take down the system and or whatever. And that is actually harmful. But circling back to the question, when you see, right now there's one of the biggest industries right now in publishing is the services that people can offer you. Editing services, formatting services, publishing, hybrid presses. Never join hybrid presses, but that's a different story. But the thing is, all these things do cost money, and it has been getting pushed towards the idea that if you do want to get published in some format, you've got to spend a good amount of money. And if you're self-publishing, that is kind of true, because you have to pay for your own editing and cover design and everything else. But when it comes to traditional publishing, and I've had editors tell me this, they go, it's fine if you want to copy edit your stuff before you submit, but in many cases, agents and editors prefer they prefer to see the draft in its most raw sense, because they're trained to see, past grammar. They're trained to see past certain storytelling issues, because in their calculus, they're like, is this something that can be easily fixed, or is this something that they need to spend a few more years honing in on? So they actually enjoy or prefer to have that process when they go over a manuscript. So when it comes down to, from a traditionally publishing standpoint, do you need to pay a good amount of money, thousands of dollars to an editor to, get that manuscript ready? It might be nice, but it's not a definite thing that you have to do.
Because it changes your voice.
Yes.
And they want your voice, just like Sangu said. So other than you have to outline in order to write, which was the worst advice I ever got, a lot of it is really, I think you're going to hear us chorusing each other, because we all get the same. If you're lucky, you get the same good advice, and if you're just breathing, you get the same bad advice. So there's tons of it out there. For those of you who are looking to self-publish, here is some of the worst advice that I have seen happen. I just laugh when people say it to me. Well, if you want your book to be successful, you need to hire a publicist. That's great. Do you have 10 grand to go nowhere? Sure. Give it to me. I'll publicize you better than they will, because at least I have a fan base that I can say, hey, this person has a book. Don't know if it's any good, but it's here. If you sounds okay. That's better than any publicist is going to be for you. That is not the same thing as the publicists that we have at a major traditional press. They're doing different things. That's a job. It's an important job, and those people are working like dogs, okay? They do work. But some random person, I'm your publicist.
Shout out to Jordan.
That's right.
Thank you. Wow.
They work hard. Some person wandering up to you with a business card saying, oh, I understand you're going to self-publish. They aren't going to be able to look and say, is your book readable? Is your book interesting? Does anyone outside of your mother even your mother doesn't want to read this book? Okay, so that is just terrible advice, because it's asking you to spend a fortune of money on something that honestly is going to give you nothing back. Here's another tip. If you get to go traditional, they pay for that. I've never paid a publicist anything, because that's part of the package of going traditional. Is it difficult to go traditional? Yes. It gets harder every year as they shrink and everything else. And the other bad advice I hear is, why do you need an agent? Yeah. Okay. My first reprint sale of a short story, they were like, it's $100 flat, period, flat, nothing. My agent, not all agents rep shorts, but she reps mine. She says, let me have this. She talked to this guy for 5 minutes, and it was $200, and he was giving me extra copies out of gratitude. That's why you need an agent, because they're going to negotiate and they're going to protect you. So everybody's sitting there, why do they deserve 15%? I was at a dinner with an editor, not in this room, I don't believe, who looked at me over drinks and said, "So why do you think anybody's bought this book yet?" I wanted to say, because nobody's bothered to read it, just like you, sir. And I didn't. I was stunned, and my agent, without drawing breath, said, "Oh, it's because it's out of the box. She's just brilliant, and they just can't handle it." I'm like, "Do you need 20%? Because I think maybe I'm not paying you enough." So you need a publicist for if you're self-publishing. No, you don't need an agent if you're going traditional. Also, no. Both of those things would be very good. You want to aim for the best agent you can land. And best depends on what you want out of your career. Do you want the biggest name? Well, you're going to get probably the least attention and dropped quickly if you don't sell well. I personally wanted someone who cared about me, not just as an author, but as a person, so that if I had struggles, if something happened, that person was still in my corner. So I went with a smaller agency. Everybody is different, and people change. They change agents, they change publishers. That's part of this business. But if you're going traditional, an agent is really strongly recommended. And if you are self-publishing, do not spend the money on a publicist unless this person is tried and true and can be honest about your book. Because a lot of times what happens with self-publishing is everybody in that circle of positivity where we're not allowed to say, "That's terrible," because then we're bad and we're killing someone's dream. That means we have to say, "Oh yeah, that sounds great," while we look at each other and go, "No one's going to read this." And then you go out and you do all this and you're crushed because no one's reading. And if you just let it sit and done another edit, it'd probably be a great book. So you don't need a publicist. You just need to make the book the best thing it can be.
Whoop, whoop.
Yeah.
Heck yeah. Sarah? I'll touch on just a couple things. One is bad advice I got, which I think was, I would hear this even before I had an agent, even before I had finished the book that would become, Heroine Complex, all of that. You'll also find, I think, that there are a lot of people who really want to tell you all about what your career will be like before you even have one, which is also weird. But there was a lot of, "This will never sell, you need to make both of them white." Okay, maybe one of the, because it was, two whole Asian American superheroines, two whole characters, or you have to make one of them white because that is just how it is, and you know how things are. And I'm not saying that it is easy. As you have heard, none of the industry is easy, and as I said before, there are many existing systemic biases that everyone will come up against, that I have certainly come up against. But all of these things that people said were also not true. I think at this point I have sold enough books with multiple Asian American lead characters that I can say this is not true. And I think that kind of goes back to what Sangu shared about her grandfather. Only you can write certain stories, or only you can write certain stories a certain way, and that is very valuable. That is what a lot of readers want. So don't listen to people who also want to tell you all about your career and exactly how it will be before you have even finished a book or gotten an agent or gotten anything. Because a lot of times, again, consider the source. Those people are mostly coming from a place of they want to seem like they know more than you, and a lot of times they don't. And then the other thing I'll say, which has kind of been said in different ways, is I think anything that starts with never or always is usually bad advice. Like Sangu, I'm also team adverb, sometimes much to my editor's chagrin, but team adverb all the way. And then another one along those lines is you can never have a prologue. Never, ever, ever have a prologue. And I will just share my one story with this, which is I thought I was going to be an author who never had a prologue, just because I was like, no, you want the action, right into the action, especially with the kinds of books I write, all of that. But my YA debut was a rom-com called I Love You So Mochi. It's contemporary. There's no superpowers or anything. It's just like people traveling in Japan and being cute. And it starts with, this Japanese American girl. She's about to have her spring break. She's going to go to Japan to visit her grandparents for the first time. And because we sold that on proposal, the first 3 chapters were pretty much her getting to the point where she makes the decision to go to Japan. So it was all still set, in an LA high school. And the editor who ended up buying the book said, I think what I would like for acquisitions is to have I think he called it a fake prologue. He was like, write a fake prologue that is a scene set in Japan, since most of the book is set in Japan, but nothing in the sample is. And that way we can, everyone can see, oh, this is what most of the book will be like. And then when we actually publish the book, we'll just take that fake prologue and we'll move it later to where it actually occurs. I was like, great, awesome, fake prologue. When I actually had to write the rest of the book, I was like, you know what? This fake prologue is a real prologue. It's perfect. It shows Japan. It shows her struggle. It shows all the themes that come up in the book before we get into sort of her daily struggle of high school life. So that book has a prologue, and it is, last time I checked, a published novel. And so obviously you can have a prologue. It is not a never situation.
I personally love prologues, so I didn't even know that was a thing. I love a good prologue.
I feel like in sci-fi and fantasy in particular, like there are prologues. There are lots of prologues.
Yeah. I remember in 4th grade reading the prologue to Aragon, and it was like my mind was blown. That's like when I became a reader.
I mean, I'm a real quick thing about like how like times change. Like back in the 90s, prologues were all the rage, and then something happened in the past like 10 years where they're like, oh, prologues are not cool because you're just info dumping. And obviously this goes back to that everyone's journey is different. Not all rules are the same. It works for some books and doesn't work for most others, in my opinion. But that's an opinion.
Well, it depends on the book. I mean, the Alien series has prologues, the Alexander Outland series. I mean, I like prologues. I also like first person. I also like adverbs. All of which, when I was coming up, should have guaranteed I would not have a career or all the titles I told you all about earlier. So, yeah, again, it's Sangu's grandfather is right, okay? And I say that every time I teach. There are no new stories under the sun. But it doesn't matter. It's freeing because you don't have to have the most original, whiz-bang, brilliant idea. You just need to have a voice that doesn't sound like everyone else's voice, telling your story with interesting characters who have interesting, intriguing things happen to them along the way, with a middle that doesn't sag and a satisfying ending. And that's a novel or a short story or a novella. That's what readers want. That's what they've always wanted. That's what they're going to want. They might want it with different fast, snappy starts or slower starts or prologues or not. But that's what people want. You don't capture people around the campfire talking about somebody boring. You talk about the man with a hook with his hand. Right? Because you're instantly there. There's a man with a hook for a hand, and he's coming for you. And now you got to hear the end of that story to make sure he's not right behind you.
And he could also appear in a prologue, just saying.
Yes, he could. In fact, he'd be great in a prologue, because then you see the man with the hook in the hand.
And then you're like, oh, how did the man with the hook get there?
How did he get there?
But I think a lot like along the lines of what Wes said, it's what works for the specific story, right? So like there are some stories where obviously you wouldn't have X, Y, maybe it doesn't have as many adverbs or something. And then there are stories where you're like, oh, the adverbs, this works perfectly. So I think like part of being a writer is you also have to learn how to figure out what goes with what story, what works with what story. I mean, something that I think is like a famous saying, and I'm sorry I don't remember who said it, and it's probably someone famous, and I'll be embarrassed. But good writing is what you can get away with. Like it's like if I'm reading a book and I'm like, wow, I don't like that this has a prologue. It probably means the book has a deeper issue. It probably means I'm responding to something else, and the prologue just doesn't fit with that. It doesn't mean never use prologues or whatever.
Or you just don't like that writing. I mean, shocking me to my core, not everybody likes everything I write. I still don't believe it. But they don't, and that's okay, because there's tons of us writing. There's plenty for everybody.
Team prologue. Anyway, okay, next question. So I saw a tweet, however many days, however long ago, by someone who I think was Chuck Wendig or Pat Rothfuss, and it said that writers, they like swim through the seas of despair, they climb the mountain of self-doubt, they slay the dragon of procrastination, and then they like cut themselves open and pull the story out, right? Like it's not always a easy process to write a book. Some people have that, some people don't. But the world we live in right now is, kind of feels a little heavy, a little intense. And then you're undergoing this process of writing, which is also a very intense process. So my question is, how do you keep writing? How do you push through when things are, a little sad, a little scary, and how do you keep producing books?
Alcohol.
Okay.
Not everybody, but that's me.
I'll start with Sangu.
Ooh, I wish I had an answer. I have yet to slay the dragon of procrastination. And that dragon is my best friend.
Procrastination pays off now and later.
Yeah. I don't know. I have ADHD, and so I think that means that I work better under pressure. So if I have months to write a book, I know logically that I need to start writing that book and sort of pace myself, be sensible.
Yeah.
That does not happen. What happens is that usually a month before the book is due, I don't sleep or eat for a month.
Yeah.
And it's not sustainable, it's not healthy. But I think having that external deadline, that sort of, and it's not just the deadline, it's also the fact that I have this chronic fear of letting people down. I think that is probably the thing that gets me to the end more than anything else, is not wanting to let people down. When you're traditionally published, there is a whole team of people working on your book and waiting for your next book, which is alarming and stressful, but also very motivating. There are editors, there are publicists, there are copy editors, there are people in marketing. Lots of people want your next book. And knowing that all of their jobs will be a lot harder if I don't make my deadline, because there's a schedule, that helps me. When I was unpublished, I didn't actually need the external deadline, because back then it was just fun. And I very much recommend writing for fun. I miss it sometimes. But when it's work, for me at least, I need that external pressure.
We are not doing well, ladies and gentlemen. Therapy is the answer. I'm kidding. Wes.
I mean, at the end of the day, I think the biggest motivator for me is that I don't want to get a day job. Like, I really don't want to go back to the office. So that is, I mean, that's like a overall kind of thing that hangs over you. But the thing about writing is when you're a pro, when you're contracted to write, whatever, under a 3-book contract or whatever, inspiration is nice, but you are contractually obligated to be creative. So once you're a quote, pro, you write on the days that you think the story is the best, and you have to write on the days that you think the story is terrible. And no matter how much you love the craft of writing and the process of storytelling, when it becomes a job, there are many aspects of your dream job that will suck. And it's cases like that where it is not a bad idea to start treating that dream career, that job, like a job, where you start to have like, how do I lay down metrics for what I do? I'm not saying stymie your creativity, but it is also a good thing just to kind of like treat it like this is how you're going to eat, And when it comes to like the process of writing, where yes, when you're writing like 85,000 word book, which is what I'm doing right now, I highly do not recommend ever doing that, by the way. But when you're doing that, when you're in that process, writing can often be all-encompassing. We sit around the desk all day staring at it. We're thinking about it during dinner time. We're not talking to our significant other. We're we're doing all these things because we're wallowing in the idea of crafting, of assembling these words and forming a coherent story that hopefully somebody will love. And it's times like that where, and my agent always tells me this, you know, we're about to make a big decision, we're about to do this or do that or sell this, and he goes, go for a walk your dog, you know. The same concept as go take a shower. You know, when you're in a shower, sometimes ideas hit you sometimes because that's when you're not so wallowing in these thoughts that your subconscious kind of helps and takes over a little bit and goes, wait a minute, here's the fix, or here's the idea you want to do. You know, so when you're stuck, step out of it. You know, play with your kids, play with your dog, go see a movie, and usually by the time you take that little break, you come back a little bit more refreshed and maybe with a new perspective on whatever the problem is.
And sometimes none of that works, all of you waiting for book 17. All of that's great, and sometimes life is going to throw you stuff that you were not prepared for and you don't roll with as well as you had hoped. And you'll be sitting next to Wes, and that's going to be a little challenging sometimes, but he's a nice guy. He just doesn't, so many panel mistakes right there. So all of that's great. You have to find what works for you, and what I will tell you in dragon slaying, and I don't find it all that. It's more, will you people let me write and stop making me handle, oh wait, I have to handle everything because I'm the matriarch of this household. Yay. You're always going to have other pressures. You're always going to have outside pressures. And what I realized several months ago was that I needed to revert back to how I used to write before I was ever published. And that means I have, God bless her, a super fan who gets on the phone with me, and she just sits there and sort of grunts when I need somebody to say, or I'll say, what's the word for, it's like asphalt, but it's not asphalt? Concrete? Yes, thank you, right? Because that's how I learned to write. My critique partner and I would get on the phone together and just sit there, and then we'd work. Also, I realized I needed to work on multiple projects at a time, because that's how what I did when I was first writing. I would have 4 or 5, 6 different things up, work on project A, finish it, work on, or get to a stopping point, go to B, and so on and so forth. And when I was only trying to do one thing, it wasn't coming out right at all. And by reverting to the olden ways, that's actually helped me a lot. But I have been through a variety of different, this is what works for me now, and you have to find it, and once you find it, you have to hold it sacred. And when it stops working for you, it helps if you can recognize that it isn't working for you. And now maybe it's time to try something else, and that means time of day. Do you do a metronome? Do you say I have to write X number of words a day? I'm really anti that. There are days I can write 10,000 words, and there's another day I write 1, and it's like, yay. So you've got to find what works for you while going through this, that also allows you to handle all the other things you have to handle in your life. Because most of us do not have the opportunity, the financial situation. I don't have staff. I'd love to have staff. Okay, I don't have people that will cook dinner, that will clean the house, that will take care of this, that will do that. I don't have that. Okay, my husband's working. We have all these other things. He has his chores. I have mine. I still have to get mine done, or the house falls down around us. So as somebody who has made all of those people at her publisher go through, oh, well, you're off the schedule right now. It's not fun. It's not fun to be late. It's not fun to be as late as I am. It's not fun to not turn in what you wanted to turn in. But sometimes that's going to happen. And when that does, the important thing is to figure out and remember why you write. I don't write because it's a job. Okay? I write because I don't want to go back to a job. So, and that helps me remember why. I think, should I go to work, get a job at Starbucks? No, let's go write the next job.
I mean, just to piggyback what she said, what Gini said about that is, if your goal is to be a career writer, a full-time writer, a working writer, and right now you're not there yet, it's something to do is like, all of us at one point were aspiring. We were writing, you know, after work, right after the kids go to bed, after whatever, because you try to steal time when you can to get the job done, because it's really two jobs. One thing that I believe helps, because obviously half of us are wrong anyway, so, is that if that's what you want to do, you have to treat it. If writing is what you want to do as a job, you have to treat it like a job. So I'm not saying work 8 hours a day, because that's not going to be possible. But like, if this is your job that you want to step into a few years down the line, then you carve out that time. You treat it like, and you guard that time. You know, you go, if all I can do every week is on Fridays work for an hour and a half, I will block out that time. And that time is my writing time, and that time is as valuable as work time, where if something gets in the way of that, we need to reschedule that, because at the end of the day, this is part of your work and your process. And when your brain gets into the mindset of this is work time, it will be actually a lot easier for your brain to kind of switch into that mode of storytelling and writing than it would be if you were just, you know, oh, I have 5 minutes here, let me try to get some writing done. You know, it's a different process for your mind. So guard that time.
And then I would say also, like, because I'm also a big fan of guarding time, making space for things, making space for your creativity even before you're getting paid for it. For me, what has really been the key thing, especially during the past few years, is protect your mental health and foster your communities. So I have an awesome therapist. I have thanked her in every single book, especially during the pandemic, every single book, because she has really helped me protect my brain, protect my mental health, protect my space that I have for creativity. I think that's very important. And then as far as community, that honestly has been something that has really kept me alive the past few years. You know, even though our communities cannot be in person as much, we have been able to be virtual. I have a lot of beautiful, creative, artistic Asian American communities, especially in Los Angeles, that I have really been able to turn to and talk to and vent with. And, you know, my husband always makes a joke about, like, me and sort of my little circle of writer and artist friends. Do you guys like writing? Because it seems like you hate it. And then I say, no, we love it. Isn't it obvious by the way that we're always complaining? But when you have those people that you can be in community with, complain with, celebrate the wins, you know, talk about the things that are not, as has been said, toxically positive, I think that has been very key, certainly for my survival and protecting my space in different ways.
Amen to that. Okay, so we have literally 1 minute left, so we're going to wrap up, but with one last question. Our last question is going to be, who is the writer whose writing you admire the most? when you are looking for inspiration, or someone who you're like, how does their brain even do that? Like
Terry Pratchett.
Okay, Terry Pratchett.
I'm going to say actually the person who gave me, because I have so many, this is impossible, but I'll say the person who really gave me a lot of this great advice and has helped me and been part of my artistic circle, Javier Marx-Watch. He is a TV writer producer. He created the show The Middleman, which I was a huge fan of before we were friends. And he has a beautiful mentorly presence that has really helped me move through the industry in a nice way.
I mean, mine kind of changes every year. So like, but if I was to have one creator that I've always come back to, it's I forgot this name. But it's the guy who wrote Gattaca. And every time I feel like there's a struggle, or I feel like, you know, there's something that I can't swim across the other side, you know, then I watch that movie, and it kind of brings me back to the idea of, you know, you never save anything for the swim back. And that's kind of what you got to do when you go into publishing.
So many, but I mean, I guess the longest time, ever since I was little, Neil Gaiman has probably been a massive influence and inspiration writing-wise, like just his humor, his style, his creativity, all of it. Yeah.
The best. All right, well, thank you all for listening, and thank you, panelists, for all your wonderful advice. Yay! I hope everybody has a great rest of the con.